In the depths of Star Wars legends, no figure climbed higher or fell deeper than Darth Vitiate. Born as Tenebrae, a Sith prodigy of terrifying potential, he rose from obscurity to become the Sith Emperor, mastering not just the dark side, but bending it entirely to his will. Where others sought power, Vitiate sought everything: immortality, domination, and the complete unraveling of existence itself if he so desired. He didn't just conquer worlds, he devoured them. He consumed the life force of entire planets to extend his own unnatural life. As centuries weighed on, Vitiate transcended the very order that birthed him. The Sith code that had began as a tool, not a truth. He now saw through its endless cycles of betrayal, weakness, lies, and in its place, he envisioned something far more terrifying. Himself, the ultimate constant. His mastery over the Force grew so absolute, so unchallenged, that he no longer saw himself as a Sith, or even a being within the Force. He saw himself as something else. An inevitability. Life, death, the Force. They were no longer mysteries to him. Vitiate himself had become cosmic. They were now his playthings. But this kind of power twists everything. Vitiate's belief in his own divinity would lead him to shed his identity again and again. From Sith Emperor, to the hidden voice behind galactic wars, to the eternal Emperor Valkorion, each new face brought him closer to an impossible goal. Not just to rule the galaxy, but to erase its soul, to replace it with his own. And in doing that, Vitiate became something worse than a villain. He became a void in the shape of a god. He was Valkorion, and as Valkorion, he discovered that true power wasn't just drawn from domination, it was drawn from unity. He learned to weave culture, belief, and loyalty into a beautiful tapestry, one that would outlast armies and empires. In building the eternal empire of Zakuul, he integrated diverse philosophies, not by forcing conformity, but by allowing freedom. His people could explore Sith teachings, the Jedi path, and even other Force traditions freely, so long as they remained loyal to the eternal throne. It was a brilliant manipulation, a beautiful lie. By giving him people the illusion of spiritual choice, Valkorion shaped the culture that unknowingly served his will, while in turn remaining stable, creative, and devout. But Valkorion's most radical innovation was the Knights of Zakuul, warriors who wielded the Force not as Jedi or Sith, but as instruments of the Emperor's will. They did not draw from the light or the dark side, but rather Valkorion himself. He became their conduit, the source, the living center of their power, and in doing so, he transformed his identity again, not just as a ruler, but now as the embodiment of the Force. In his mind, Vitiate had evolved into the ultimate constant, not just a god king, but a cosmic principle, something beyond life and death, something beyond balance, beyond even the Force. But this was the ultimate lie, one he told his people, one he even whispered to himself. For all of his grandeur, Valkorion would never wield the light. He could never heal, inspire, or create without the shadow of control. The light side remained forever out of his reach, a truth he could only imitate through policy, not power. And yet in allowing his people to share in its understanding, to blend it with the discipline of the dark side, his empire flourished. It excelled in ways that he could not imagine. While Valkorion remained shackled to chaos and the dark side, his people forged a civilization that momentarily touched something greater. Maybe even something truly balanced. And in that, Valkorion's empire became the closest he ever would become to godhood. Not through fear, but through a world, through a people that no longer needed to fear him. Despite the illusion of balance allowed within the empire though, Valkorion still saw the Jedi and Sith as threats, not just to his power, but to the very order that he sought to impose. The Jedi were hope, compassion, the unpredictable resilience of the light. The Sith were worse, a mirror of his own past, chaotic, cannibalistic, incapable of stability, but relentless, powerful. To Valkorion, they were relics of an old galaxy that refused to evolve, and so he moved to wipe them all out. He didn't wage war for conquest, he waged war for cleansing. Jedi and Sith alike were obstacles to his singular vision, a galaxy shaped in his image, emptied of resistance, opposition, and even emptied eventually of free will. This obsession with control, the belief in himself as the only necessary being, poisoned everything that Valkorion touched, even and especially his family. Valkorion fathered children not out of love, but as experiments, extensions of ego. His cruelty, his emotional distance, his tendency to test and betray warped each of them in different, horrible ways. Arcan was tormented by his father's disappointment and became a brutal enforcer, the once promising Thexan driven to tragedy. Valen, twisted by Valkorion's fear of her power, she was shackled, manipulated only to the point where rage remained. These were not heirs, they were tools, shaped by loss, sharpened by pain, and ultimately discarded when they failed, failing to show the perfection that Valkorion saw only in himself. In the end, Valkorion sought not peace, but silence. His vision of peace was not harmony, it was emptiness. No war, no rebellion, no love, no memory. Valkorion saw himself, alone, at the end of time. The last thing in the galaxy. A dark god of chaos, unchallenged, untouchable, free to reshape and unmake reality at will, without question, without consequence. His empire, his children, even his enemies were all stepping stones, all of them leading to this grim transcendence. And what remained was no longer Vitiate, no longer Valkorion. What remained was the Void, wearing a crown. As time passed, Valkorion's mask would slip. The Eternal Empire, grand and beautiful as it was, became another shell, another stage in his endless performance. He no longer ruled merely as a Sith, or even as a god emperor of a unified people. He became something darker, something hidden, a force behind the Force itself. Valkorion transcended ideology. He was no longer just a threat to the Jedi or the Sith. Valkorion became the villain behind all traditions, the silent corruption whispering in every temple, the hand behind every catastrophic conflict, the shadow in every ancient prophecy. He had no allegiance, light or dark, only his will, and that made him the ultimate threat, an entity untethered by morality, belief, or even identity. In the end, the being who began as Tenebrae, the prodigy, the devourer of worlds, the eternal emperor, was reduced to something terrifyingly simple. Stripped of all of his masks, all of his empires, all of his myth, Valkorion ruled by two universal truths, a boundless hunger for power and a suffocating fear of death. For all his philosophies, of all his grand designs, he was driven by the same core weaknesses as every Sith before him. He feared the void that he came from. He feared non-existence, and so consumed, manipulated, and he ruled not to elevate others, or even to elevate himself. What Valkorion did was to delay the end, to outpace oblivion. But the great irony, the cosmic tragedy of it all, in running from death, Valkorion became its avatar. He left behind nothing but ruin, dead worlds, broken legacies, shattered souls. His peace was stillness, his love, control, his gift, annihilation. At the end of all things, he did not transcend death, he became the promise of it, a god of silence, the final tyrant, the last echo of a man who could never let go, and that echo will haunt the Force forever. In many ways, Valkorion mirrors the infamous Palpatine. Both were master manipulators, both outlived empires, and both sought to bend the Force to their will. But where Palpatine was a master tactician of the Sith, Valkorion was even more insidious. Palpatine craved galactic control, Valkorion craved cosmic authorship. Palpatine ruled through fear and dominance, Valkorion ruled through illusion, through faith, through hope turned hollow. Valkorion did not want to rule the galaxy, he wanted to erase it, then rewrite it in his image alone, eternal and unquestioned. Hopefully this video helped to shine a light on Valkorion, for his allegiance and his philosophy was perhaps the greater evil of all of the evils in Star Wars, not because he screamed louder or killed more, but because he smiled when doing it all, because he offered a vision of peace that ended in nothingness, a god not of creation, but of eraser. We've got a massive follow-up discussion for this video planned with the Archivist, one where we'll be diving even further into Valkorion's legacy, his contrast with the other Dark Lords of the Sith, and what his story means in the grand scope of Star Wars legends. So, if you enjoyed this holocron, we hope to see you then. But as always, my friends, crush that subscribe button for more lore on your favorite Dark Lord of the Sith, Valkorion, and have a phenomenal day.